Hello and welcome back. You're with Zero MT. We are making low-cost, low-tech music with hopefully some non-traditional but pretty cool tools. The one we're using right now is Pedalboard. Very brief recap of what we did last time. We created a place for VSTs on my system. It was at the root of the D drive, so it's easy to get to. I explained the difference between VST2s and I hinted at VST3s. We are using 32 bits, so this one directory is the one we're going to use the most. Yes, you could ignore the others, but it's probably good to already put these categories into your brain because we will encounter these sooner or later. We installed Pedalboard, which was really just copying Pedalboard to a location and dragging a shortcut to its exe over here onto the desktop, and we made a demo project. There were a couple of things that we did. Oh, and we downloaded VSTs. Let's take a look at the ones we got. We got Jazz Baby, Midi monitor so you could see the Midi instructions, quick key so you could produce the Midi instructions, and we got these reg files that I did not do proper explanation of. It turns out, as far as I can tell, we don't need this in the current setup. But every reg file is potentially dangerous. These are not. If they look like this on the inside, they're fine. This is just setting a key that says, hey, if you have quick keys from Toby Bear, is synth is 0. Okay, fine. And then what does this one say? Hey, if you have quick keys from Toby Bear, is synth is 1. This has to do with how the DAW, how the digital audio workstation, Pedalboard in our case, interprets the plugin, interprets the VST. Does it see it as an effect or as an instrument? Is synth would be is instrument. I thought these were necessary, but after going through, I see that they're not. In general, if you just go into your VST folder and start deleting stuff, you will break all sorts of stuff. But in our case, we're going to delete those. We're going to get rid of those. I'm pretty sure those are fine. And to prove it, we're going to install another VST really soon. Okay, one other issue that came up is where we store these things. I use the default location, which is in the Documents folder. I'm not a super fan of it. It's not great, but it works fine. And it's just good to have everything in the same place. So wherever you choose, someplace you can get to pretty quickly is nice. Now let's look inside. I showed you the blank version of this last time, which was actually not blank when you read the XML. But here you'll see a lot more information. See, here we've got quick keys, which wasn't in the blank version of this project. And it's got a state. This is everything that can be set in that GUI to what is it set. And Neil saves that for us in what looks like probably base 64 encoding. So you don't need to look at this. I'll show you occasionally. This is where your work is going. And there are things in here that we might one day want to change, like the location of quick keys on the directory. That's why I said let's pick a good directory for this. If we start moving things around, we'll break this project, but then we can fix this project with a simple text editor by going in here and fixing the paths. So it's good to know that this stuff is there. If you're sharing with somebody else and they installed their version of Pedalboard or their VSTs in a different directory, that's fine. All they need to know is how to do a find and replace in this file. This is the benefit of open source. You don't have to be a genius. You can dig in a little bit and make a huge difference in the output. Okay. It's lucky that I don't have to be a genius because I am not one. All right, let's go back. I think that's everything I wanted to say about admin. Let's go back into the project. What I want to do for you today is, I guess we're going to open demo 1. It looks a lot prettier here in Pedalboard than it did in Notepad++. Remember that we Remember that we wired up Quick Keys to send instructions to Jazz Baby and then wired Jazz Baby's audio output to our Windows audio output. Remember that all of this stuff was specified up here in the options audio settings. What output are you using? What input are you using? We're not using the microphone yet. Actually, Heaven Help Us will probably do that soon. But this is where those specifications were made. And every time you even pretend to alter that, you'll see the project reload. Remember that we discovered that MIDI instructions, if I connect Quick Key to MIDI monitor, MIDI instructions are just a few bits each. That's also 1, 2, 3. That's 3 bytes each in this case, I think. They have an on and an off. You can see if I hold the note, the on arrives immediately, but the off does not arrive usually until there. I release the note. It's got a value, which is the pitch of the note. There are 127 different values available, I think. There are 127 different velocities, so how hard was the note hit. That is very good to know. We're not going to get into any more detail, though. You can check it out yourself. It looks like Jazz Baby is connected to the wrong output. Why is that? Well, because there are a few visual glitches here. And it's obviously connected to the correct... It's not connected to the input, it's connected to the output, because when I hit the keys, it works. But if you're concerned about that, you can very quickly just reconnect it. I'll select and delete that, reconnect. Same behavior. So don't let little glitches bother you. Remember, all free tools, all cool stuff. The meat is in the audio. That's what we want. So let's make some more audio. What I want to do at the end of this is have chords going, and if possible, arpeggios. We probably will run out of time for that, but hopefully we'll be able to do at least chording pretty soon. Now, a chord is multiple notes happening at the same time. Usually, it is considered to be 3 or more notes happening at the same time. If you're using Quick Keys, you have a really cool, simple way of doing that. So I'm going to show you that to begin with. We can go to Options. Before I show you the chording, I'm going to show you Keyboard. You think, well, this is a keyboard, right? Yes, but this is talking about your computer keyboard. If I select this button, then I can type on my keyboard. Here's a B, here's an N. They don't correspond to the actual notes. Here's an M, here's an X. And if I hold down, I'm going to hold down the M key on my keyboard. I was not tapping it, I was just holding it down. Remember, Windows does things like multiple keys when you hold a key down, etc. So what you're doing here is a kind of a lame way of turning one row of your typewriter, your computer keyboard keys, into a kind of lame audio keyboard. You can't sustain notes very long before they start repeating. They don't repeat at any tempo that you would necessarily desire, etc. Still, if you just need to be able to type on your keyboard and hear the sound, there you go. You can do it. I'm going to do as little of that as possible, taking that off. It's also not, in my opinion, suitable for performance, but it is suitable for triggering things. If you just need to hit one key to trigger something, that's a nice way to do it. Now let's talk about a chord. Every time I hit, just as you saw with the MIDI monitor, every time I hit a button, every time I hit a key, rather, we're going to send Jazz Baby away. Just looking at it, it's pretty, but it doesn't do anything. Every time I hit a key, we'll hit this C here. This is what we get, an on and an off. Well, I'll do the same thing, and I'll hold the C. Forget which one I hit. And release. This is saying it's C3. If I hit the next C, it'll say it's C4. The next one up is C5. Between those two, I think is either an F sharp or a G flat. Let's see. F sharp 4. So these are how the instructions correspond to the keys we press. You'll notice it's a one-to-one relationship as far as keys pressed and note on events. And then every note on gets a note off once the key is released. Fine. Let's clear it. Now we're going to go into options. I have 5 boxes here, none of which are checked. They get slightly brighter. One thing I wish Toby Bear would have done is made the difference between off and on more obvious, but that's nitpicking, and these are awesome tools. We'll talk a bit about chords. These are semitone adjustments, which means that when I hit a key over here, this will also hit another key for me. And it doesn't have to be there. It could be any one of these. So I'll select this one. And I'll say I want to hit the key that is 7 semitones up. Every octave has 12 semitones in it. And you can count the semitones by saying, here's C, that's 0, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I hit a C, I should get a G also. Let's see what happens. And look, 2 note on events, 2 note off events. Okay, that's cool. What if I throw in 4 semitones up? That means 1, 2, 3, 4, I get an E and a G. We'll clear this and we'll have a look what happens. 3 note on events and 3 note off events. These are 3 notes all happening at the same time, which by any definition is a chord. This one is called a major triad. It's 0, 4, and 7 semitones from whatever note that we hit. Notice we don't have to turn on the 0. If we turn on the 0, we'll get the whatever the root note is twice, which is not what we want. I'll show you that real quick. Well, okay, that's really quick. But you see we had 4 note on events and 4 note offs. And there were 2 C3s. Why? Because Quick Keys always sends whatever you clicked and then whatever else you've told it to. And we told it to also send another of whatever we clicked. So in Quick Keys, you don't need that. Every VST is different. It's good to get familiar with them, but it's also good to just get a general feel for what you're adjusting. Clear that, do it again. Now we've got major triad, and it doesn't just work on C's. If I want an F sharp major, there it is. If I want a B major, there it is. I get pretty much what I need here. That's really nice. I can have some fun with that if I want. I'm still clicking keys to make these things happen, but what's happening is now more sophisticated. The next thing we're going to do is just turn this off. Now that I've unticked those, we're back to 1 click gives us 1 note on. And it doesn't matter that they're still set. We're not using them. But just to avoid confusion, I'm going to unset them. There's another way to do this that's more generic, that doesn't depend only on Quick Keys. Of course, it depends on something else, but this is a more general way of creating the same effect. So I'm going to save this, and then we're going to... it's a good idea to save a lot, because this will crash, especially when we're loading new VSTs, and we're about to load a new VST. It's not nearly as fragile as you might think, but don't get caught unawares. Always just save. So when I was downloading VSTs, I moved them all to my VST new folder, which is, thanks to my excellent organization, that was sarcasm. Here it is. There's a chordator.zip in here. So I'm going to open this zip, and I'm going to inspect it, and I'm going to grab everything that has a chordator in it. Now the DLL, that's the VST. That's probably all I need. These FXBs are, I believe, preset banks, and the reg files are the same ones that we saw before. So actually, I'm going to just grab this, copy. This seems a little bit arbitrary, but just ride along with me. All right, so now we've got the chordator in there. But if we click over here, we don't see the chordator. Why? Because remember, plugin list, options. If we want to, we can remove the ones that are missing and then scan for new ones. Scan. And look, that's very fast. Now, what happened last time when I had my first attempt that I was unhappy with in making this video is that the scan showed 0% and it just sat there at 0%. And I thought, this is a bug, something's wrong. Well, this piece of software was made for much slower machines. And I think what was happening is my machine was scanning this thing so fast that the monitor to watch the progress of the scan took longer than the scan itself. So if you see a behavior where it says it's scanning and it's not going anywhere, try just closing it. If you have to, close all the way out of Pedalboard and then look at the list. I bet it's in there anyway. And sure enough, there's chordator. Okay. Now, we're making music. I am going to remove this link here, and we are no longer making music. We are still sending MIDI instructions, but they're not getting down to Jazz Baby. Now, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to select chordator. And I am going to, before I connect anything to it, I'm going to look at the interface. This is really simple, and I really like it. It is very similar, you'll notice, to what we saw in the options of quick keys, but more generic. Very similar because it's made by the same developer. Thank you again, Toby Bear. And more generic because it doesn't care. It doesn't have a keyboard. It doesn't care what you hit. It defaults to sending 1 0 through, and then the other offsets can be turned on or turned off as you like. So let's turn on the first three. We're going to clear. I'm going to wire this to the chordator. So I'm wiring quick keys to the chordator. And if I click things, no difference in behavior. Now I'm going to wire the chordator. Oh, actually, I'm going to remove the wire to the MIDI monitor. Click things, no difference in behavior, except MIDI monitor is also silent now. And now I'm going to wire this to both the MIDI monitor and to Jazz Baby. Now I made something that looks like a mistake, kind of on purpose. I ticked all three of these boxes, even though they were all zeros. Let's see what happens. So I got 3 note on events, all the same notes, 3 note off events, all the same notes. Okay, good enough, but that's not really what I wanted. Let's offset this one by +4 semitones, and let's offset this one by +7 semitones. And now let's hear. We're back to our major triad. And if we take this middle step down to just 3 semitones, sounds similar but sort of sad. That's the minor triad. Knowing a little bit, just a very little bit about music theory really pays off. You can explore a ton of stuff with this. I recommend Michael New on YouTube. He's doing other things now, but before he moved on to his current projects, he did some amazing, very easy to understand music theory lessons. And the Anatomy of Chords is part of that. It's pretty early in the series. I just took a whole Saturday and watched as many of those as I could, and it reminded me of all the music theory I had forgotten. Even if you have never had any music theory, Michael's stuff it's probably even more worth your time. But a spoiler alert, cheating, jumping ahead. Most of the chords that we're used to hearing are called, I think the word is tertian. They are tertian construction. That's I'm going to already embarrass myself. But this means that the way it shakes out is every note in the chord is different. And the one above, whichever one you're on, the lowest one is called the root. And the one above the root is either 3 or 4 semitones above it. And the one above that is 3 or 4 semitones above it. So here we have a gap of 4 and then a gap of 3. If we do this, we have a gap of 3 and a gap of 4. If we do this, we have a gap of 2 and a gap of 5, and that's going to sound bad. Not terrible. And if we do this, we have a gap of 1 and a gap of 6, and that will sound terrible. So the sweet spot in all of these is typically a 3 and a 4, or a 4 and a 3. Or I could go a 4 and a 3 and another 3. This is a chord I use a lot, a 7 chord. There's so much to explore here. I would say, I'll try to put a link in the description somewhere. Michael New on YouTube, amazing tutorials. You can learn this stuff very fast by watching what he does. All right, we're doing reasonably well on time. We've got chords going. We need arpeggiation now. Now, an arpeggiation is a sort of a manufactured word. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to remove chordator, the link between quick keys and chordator, and I'm just going to put quick keys direct to Jazz Baby. And we're going to walk this major triad. That's the 7, I think. And then if we just walk around here and don't mistarget our clicks, things sound fairly euphonic, which is to say there's not a lot of dissonance. There's kind of a nice smooth up and down, back and forth, and we get the musical expectations that our ears have been trained to hear. If we do all this at once, it also sounds good. But we're not walking anywhere. Everything's happening at once. So an arpeggio is, generally speaking, a walk up and down a chord. So instead of playing all the notes of the chord at once, we play the notes in sequence. We could play them in a rising sequence, in a falling sequence. We could go up and down and up. We could even sort of randomly stagger around the chord. All of those generally, by some definition, qualify as our arpeggio. So anything that does that for us, because I am a poor performer, obviously, but even more clumsy by clicking with my mouse. Anything that does that for us is an arpeggiator. So now I want to find an arpeggiator called Randarp. Hopefully it's on plugins for free, because that's my favorite place to get these things. Yes, it is. Okay. This is Code FN42. They are the developer. They've made some really cool stuff. A lot of it is sophisticated and newer enough that it doesn't work in Pedalboard exactly the way you would expect. And this has a couple of quirks, one of which is really annoying in Pedalboard, but that's fine. It's still super useful. Let's grab the Win32 version. And yes, it's down. Now let's go to Downloads. And there's my Randarp. I'm going to cut that and I'm going to carry it over to VST New, if I can find that. Could be anywhere. All right, paste. Now, you may want to keep, these are like books on your bookshelf that you'll never reread. You may want to keep these zip files as you get them. There's a good argument for keeping them, a good argument for throwing them away. You might want to create a VST old and keep those, the ones that you've already installed. We'll not worry about that too much. You're grown up. You can handle it very easily. The README files, I'm just going to leave those. It's good to inspect these, you know, especially if you're just trying to get used to how these things work. Anything that's named after it, I'm going to grab. You don't need the PDF. This is the user guide, but then again, why not have the manual, especially if it's delivered? copy. So it came down in our zip file. We don't need any other grief to get it, so let's just use it. Paste. All right, now, before I go any further, save. Let's see if we can get the randarp in there. All right, click. Where's the randarp? Have to scan. Always have to scan. And did it find it? Yes, put it at the top. Now, the next time we go through this, it'll be alphabetized. But for now, every time a new VST shows up, it shows up at the top. You don't have to do these one at a time. Sometimes I'll do them dozens at a time, but the process is always the same. If you're going to have a problem with loading one and you're loading them a dozen at a time, the odds of a problem somewhere in the process greatly increase. That's just something to keep in mind. Now I want to load up my randarp. Okay, and before we do anything, look at the interface. It's just like what we saw on the web page, but it's kind of confusing. Let's do this. Let's leave it totally as it is for a minute. Let's not mess with it at all for a minute. But I'll leave it on the screen. Now, let's get these out of the way. And quick keys, it's still wired up to the chordator. Nothing is wired up to the randarp. We've got our Midi monitor and Jazz Baby in there. Only Jazz Baby is going to the output, so we're getting chords because we're sending this to the chordator. It's the 7 chord. If I just mute this one, it goes back to the major triad. And that's good. That's useful. Now we're going to clear this. I'm going to leave. Actually, no. I don't actually know how to deselect these things, but let's just pretend I didn't do that. I am going to delete the link between quick keys and chordator, so now there's nothing coming out. I'm going to route the instructions from quick keys over to the MIDI input for randarp. Always we see this MIDI channel selector. It's great. Rarely do I use it, especially in projects this simple. Randarp might have some audio output. It kind of looks like it's got some audio output, but randarp is not. I don't even have any idea what that sounds like. I never use the audio output. I use the instructions output because that's what an arpeggio is. It takes instructions and it does something with them. So we're going to take that and put that into Jazz Baby. And I'm going to hit a key in quick keys. Whoa, what just happened? Okay, let's explain. One thing you could do is wire it into MIDI monitor also. And this is fast. So you see we fill up a lot, but we're seeing some note ons for C3 and some note ons for C4, even though I'm only clicking C3. And they're happening really fast, even though I'm just clicking once, holding it and then releasing the key. So what's going on? Well, the randarp is playing 16th notes, which are fast. The smaller the fraction, the faster the note. A whole note is 16 times the size of a 16th note. I don't even know exactly what we would call that. An 8-bar note is 8 times the size of a whole note. It's based on the tempo. So if we were to change this tempo to, let's say 100, actually let's say like 70, so it'll be much more noticeable. And I'm hold down this key again. So that is 16th notes at 70 beats per minute versus what we heard earlier, 16th notes at 120. Great. All right. There is a selection of octaves here that is set to 1. If I click on this, well, actually it's set to 2. The minimum setting is 1. If I click on this, I'll see displayed the value. And I could do this. I could set it to 3 octaves. And I could set it to random 1, which is going to give me, this is where the rand in randarp comes from, 3 octaves with occasionally 4 octaves in it. Starts to sound interesting. Okay, so that's cool. Also, look over here in randarp. When I click the key in quick keys, you should see the key value show up there, the note value. This is a C3. So the randarp says C3 there. A lot more than C3 is coming out. There's C5s and C6s. We can see what's coming out here. Okay. So next, remove the link between quick keys and randarp. Restore the link between quick keys and chordator. Play that. Okay, that's good. Now, remove the link between chordator and jazz baby. Play that. We get nothing. I'm going to remove the link between chordator and Midi monitor too. Nothing. So what Midi monitor is doing now, let's clear it, it's just letting us spy on what randarp is producing. And no instructions are reaching jazz baby because of this gap between the chordator and the randarp. If I bridge that gap, not with the chordator, but with quick keys, then we go right back to what we had. But what if I bridge the gap with chordator? There should be more than one note appearing up here in the randarp. And they should correspond to these notes, not this one because we turned it off, but these 3 notes in the major triad. Let's push a key and see what happens. We've got arpeggiation. We're walking those chords. And remember when we messed up our intervals and it sounded terrible? It doesn't sound quite as terrible this way because we are walking them instead of sounding them all at once, but it sounds much more unsettling, a little bit horror film. Let's go back to the major. And if we lower this by 1, we're still creating tertian chords. So it should still sound good, but since this is a smaller interval above the root, it should sound a little sadder. It should sound minor. So we've got some character, we've got some music, we've got some rhythm, we've got some things happening here. Now, man, it does sound a little bit like a sewing machine. So they say the note order is up and the octave order is up. What if we take the note order and just say down? Okay. Now what if we say, we've got a number of up, down, and down, ups. You'll want to experiment with these. But up, down, 2, actually I kind of like the down. Let's say down, up, 2. It's going to go down. It's going to dwell there for, I think, just 1 iteration, then it's going to move up. I like that. Okay, there's so much cool stuff that we can do with this. We can change our octave order to random. And did I crash it? No, I didn't. We can add some swing. Let's add a lot of swing so you can tell the difference. This affects the timing. Add a little less swing. It's a lot of fun. Your general techno and everything has almost no swing, at least the minimal stuff. We can reduce the note probability, and this is like probably my favorite control in this whole rack of awesome controls. It's skipping the notes. So let's add some of these together. Let's give it a little swing. One thing I like to do is a shift -1 and then random +2. That means it drifts a little bit, like within 1% of when we should be hearing it. The The gate is the length of the note. We'll reduce that a little bit, so the note might be 90% of its length, but then it could get a lot longer. We'll say 30. So 30%. So it goes from 90% to 120. 90% is where we set this. 30 is where we set that. So that's our range, 90 to 120. 120 being 90 plus 30. Velocity. This one's really good because we want to. Some of these can be really soft. Let's make them half as loud as they were. Velocity is a representation of how hard the key was struck. And then let's add plenty of randomness in here so it can even go a little bit above. All right, pretty happy with this. Let's hold down a key and let's listen. So we've got something musically interesting now. Not great. There's all sorts of other things we could do. We're at the end of this video pretty much. I want to show you one other trick. Latch. So what Latch does is it just holds on to the last thing that you played. So where I was holding the key down and we were hearing it, then I was releasing the key and we stopped. In this case, the release of the key essentially means nothing. It will keep going. So I'm just gonna hit C3 again. But now I'm not clicking on anything. So what we had while that was latched was a semi-random arpeggiation in C major and with a lot of motion up and down the keyboard, a lot of interesting stuff going on. It was not in perfect time. The shift was really close to perfect time, but it wasn't perfect. So this would be like a very good piano player, but not a mechanically perfect piano player. The swing gives it some interesting behavior in the timing. The velocity means that the values change. The volume levels change while we're working. So really happy with all of that. If I were to change this to eighth notes, it would be half as fast. Turn the latch back on. We can talk about what all that means soon, I hope. But these are the note values, and if it's dotted, the note is 150 times as long as it used to be. 150% as long as it used to be, sorry. That gives you, hopefully, a feel for how cool the setup is, and you can start making a significant amount of music by just latching a randarp. Are there other instruments than piano? Yes, hundreds. Hopefully we'll do much more interesting stuff with that. But we got through chords and through our arpeggiations. I hope you enjoyed the video and hope to do more soon. Here's our trick, file save. Okay, demo 1 is still with us. It's gotten a lot more interesting. There may be more to see next time. Actually, pretty much guarantee it. Thanks.